What is the number one thing that we emphasize to you each and every month? Think about it. Why do you read Success or listen to the CD each month? It's about learning and growth. We want you to continually grow each and every month. Sometimes the best way to grow, although it might be the hardest, is when we make mistakes or encounter a failure. It can be difficult in the heat of the moment to see the lesson in a painful scenario, but there's always a lesson to be learned. There's always growth to be had. In his new book, Sometimes You Win, Sometimes You Learn, John Maxwell helps people see the value when we unwittingly lose, fail, or make a mistake. John, great to have you back here with us at Success.
It's my joy. It's great to be with you and great to be with all the listeners, Darren.
So I want to start with a story from you, John. In your book, you talk about a mistake that you made that was a pretty big deal at the time. Share that story with us and then what lesson that you drew from it.
Well, I think the story you're referring to is a couple of years ago, I accidentally had a gun in my briefcase, and I went through the airport there, the inspection area in West Palm Beach, and of course, when it literally, I remembered that I had the gun. Talk about timing! Literally, when that briefcase was under the X-ray machine, and I looked at the guy and I said, "There's a gun in there. There's a gun in there." And he said, "I know. I'm looking at it right now." And what had happened is I fly private a lot, and I'd been in Birmingham, Alabama, and I had a friend of mine. I'm not really a gun person. I've hunted a few times, but that's not really like my passion. And he gave me a gun, and he said, "Look, you travel a lot, and your wife Margaret needs this. So just take that to her." And so I said, "Fine." And I was traveling private, and I stuck it in my briefcase, never gave it a thought. And about a week later, I was going to do a commercial flight, and it was still in my briefcase. So that's, it was a stupid mistake. And I'll never forget how I felt. They got me over at the side. They're looking at the gun. They're looking at the briefcase. The sheriff are getting ready to take me away for questioning, which is going to be 2 hours. And then they're going to mugshot me, fingerprint me. And I mean, this is not a little mistake. This is a big mistake. And I can remember how I felt. I was very mad at myself for doing something so stupid, and then I became quite discouraged. I thought, wow, I've worked all my life to build up a reputation, and now this is going to hit the news that motivational teacher, writer, author, whatever, is taking a gun into the airport, and it was a very difficult time for me, and I did a lesson from it called Stupid Hurts. And basically, I did the lesson maybe 3 months afterwards. And of course, after a while, I got absolved and everything's fine now. But I remember asking myself, what am I learning from this? What's my takeaway from doing something so dumb? And first of all, I thought, boy, you talk about encouraging people, and somebody like me does something that's stupid. First of all, my family, think about it this way, Darren. My family, I put the stupid bar so low. You don't understand. No matter what they do, they kind of look and say, well, it was a dumb thing I did, but at least I didn't take a gun through an airport. I mean, I kind of set the standard for stupidity. And what's crazy about that, something amusing, is that was in March a couple of years ago, 3 years ago now maybe. And I was on the cover at the 1st of March of Success magazine. I was so proud, and all my friends were proud, and it was kind of a highlight. I mean, to be on the cover of a magazine like Success is pretty good. And so 3 weeks later, I have a mugshot taken of me of taking a gun through an airport. And so I took the cover of the magazine and I took the mugshot and I laminated both of them, and I literally keep them in my briefcase, and I travel with them all the time. And the reason I do that is I pull them out every once in a while, Darren, and I just remind myself it isn't very far from the penthouse to the outhouse. And that we're all one step away from stupid. And it's been a great lesson in humility to me. It's kind of like, wow, okay, John, you think you're doing something wonderful and you think you've achieved something. You're the guy that, got a mugshot and fingerprinted, and you can do something real quick to kind of mess up your reputation or mess up all the good things. And I will have to say, for a brief period of time, I thought, wow, I worked so hard to get where I am, and I could have just blown this. And of course, the lessons I learned out of that was that I needed to be careful. Obviously, I wasn't. and that I need to be humbled. And of course, I certainly was there. There were other lessons, obviously, I learned out of that experience. But again, once we have a bad experience, and the sometimes you win, sometimes you learn book is all about don't worry about your loss, or don't focus on your loss. The question is not, did you lose? We all have those times where we lose. The question is, what did you learn? And so when anybody tells me about a loss or a mistake or a failure in life, I listen to them, and as soon as I get the chance, I say, okay, we've all done dumb things. What did you learn? Because that's going to tell me if they're going to repeat the failure over and over again, because if they didn't learn anything, they certainly will. Or if they really have learned something, it's going to really aid to their growth in their life.
Well, I like how you're using it as an anchor for keeping you humble. I remember I listened to Dennis Waitley, and he said, one thing that he does to keep himself humble is just to go and stand in front of a mirror naked. And one time his wife caught him doing that, and she said, if you really want to be humble, just jump up and down a little bit. So it's one way to keep yourself humble.
Let the jiggling begin.
And in the end, we're all really just it comes down to that. We're all pretty human.
I like that too. It's very, and how true that is.
Yeah. So let's talk about why this is so painful for people. Tell us, what triggers when we make these mistakes. Each time we lose or each time we make a mistake, what happens inside, so that if we can identify it, we can maybe not have it affect us so much.
Well, we get emotionally stuck when we fail. I see this happen all the time. It happens to me, it happens to you, it happens to everybody. And what I mean by emotionally stuck is, once something has happened that we didn't plan on or that's very negative in our life, there's a tendency for us just to freeze. And when we fail, the tendency is, of course, for us to get emotionally, sometimes mentally, sometimes spiritually stuck, and we just say, I'm freezing. And of course, that's not healthy. And then I also, when people lose, many times it causes them to what I call escape. They say, oh my gosh, I got to get out of here. I've got to leave. I've got to leave the scene of the accident. And what I talk about mistakes and failure, Darren, is very simple. That when we fail, when we have this bad thing happen to us, we really only have two choices on how to respond. We either learn from it or we leave it. And 95% of the people, they leave the scene. They just say, I got to get out of here. They put a disclaimer on it. Didn't see anything, didn't do anything. It's not my fault. And what happens is, if we leave that failure, we never learn from it. And so what happens is we repeat it. We do it again. But if we are mature enough and have enough security to stay and say, okay, this wasn't what I wanted, wasn't what I expected, but I'm going to learn from this. What does this teach me? And we stick around long enough to learn it. What I learned a long time ago is, if you learn from your mistakes, you never have to run from them. And you also won't repeat them. So, losses cause us to want to escape. They cause us to want to be emotionally stuck, and neither one of those things are good, but it happens to all of us. It happens to me. Both of those I have experienced, and both of those I've done in my life.
Now, you talked about if we're going to lose and we make a mistake, the key is obviously to take that loss and learn from it, gain from it. So let's talk about how to do that, especially if our mistake has affected more than just ourselves. And then also explain, what kind of long-term negative impact there is if we choose to just harden ourselves to these losses instead of learning from them.
Well, first of all, I'm asked sometimes the question on when do I make a mistake that is just so big that I lose my reputation, or it costs me dearly, and it's possible for us to do that. But I used to do a lot of teaching on this. I haven't done it for years, really, but it really was a good visual teaching. I would bring somebody up on stage with me, and I would talk about trust. And I would pretty much say that trust is like currency, that if you have a lot of trust, you have a lot of change in your pocket. So I would reach in my pocket, and I would, have several bills there, and I'd pull it out, and I'd say, this is a visual example of trust. When you have a lot of trust, you have a lot of change in your pocket. And then the person was beside me, I would say, but let's say I do something real stupid as a leader. And when I do something that's ridiculous or dumb or a failure or mistake, I give up some of my change. And so I would hand the person some change. But it's okay because I still have change left. And let's say that I go do something dumb again, and so I give up change. And you can see where we're going with this, Darren. I just kept maybe half a dozen real dumb things I did. And so one time, when I get to maybe that 5 or 6, I do something dumb, so I give up some change. Well, I'm used to doing that now. I'm used to using my currency to stay around as a leader. So, but this time when I give up change, there's something different. I don't have any more change. And now I am emotionally, leadership-wise bankrupt with the people. And what I taught was that it isn't the biggest mistake that usually does this to us. It's a series of continual mistakes. Until one day I've lost credibility as a person that's trustworthy. I just haven't performed as I needed to perform. And one day I run out of change. And I think that when people say, "Wow, boy, I lost my job," or I lost my reputation, it maybe wasn't the biggest thing that caused it, but it was probably the last one. It was a series of mistakes, and that's why we need to learn from our failures. That's why we need to learn from our mistakes, because if we don't, we're going to lose change. And the flip side of that is every time I recover from a mistake and do something that is trustworthy, I gain change. I don't think one failure makes a person a failure. I think it's a series of successes that make a person a success. I think it's a series of failures that make a person a failure. So the change illustration kind of, I think, sometimes helps people mentally get their mind and their hands around this. And so they say, okay, now I understand the downside of several losses in a row.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just like one great victory doesn't make you victorious. It's the compound effect of all those little things that add up over time that becomes your reputation, your brand, and the bank account that you've got with somebody on the trust equation. I want to pull one key word, which I think is an important part of this discussion, of something you said there, and that's recovery, right? So we're all going to make mistakes. Look, we're human. We're going to do it. And now the key is how you handle it, how you recover it, right? We've seen lots of people who have made big mistakes, but really what cost them their reputation and their credibility is how they handled it. So give us some instruction about how to recover from a mistake, and maybe give us some examples of people other than yourself who made some big mistakes, and who not only recovered from them, but it actually helped them in the future.
As a young leader, I had a mentor one time, his name was Paul, who walked in my life and said, "John, your actions will never bury you, but your wrong reactions will." And I remember that I was 22, I was 23, I was very, very young. And I think that he was helping me understand that perspective is huge in this. How I see myself, how I see my mistakes. Sometimes I get amused because I love to play golf, and if I'm playing golf with a guy and he makes a bad shot and he seems to be really upset with it, I'll smile and I'll look at him and I'll say, "Now, let me ask you a question. Do you do this for a living? Is this how you make money?" And of course, the guys I play with, they don't do it for a living. They're just like I am. They're just amateurs, and some of them aren't that good. And they say, "Well, no, of course I don't do this for a living." I said, "Then be happy. Because if you did it for a living, you'd have a reason to be upset because you're not any good. And you're not going to make any money, and you're not going to do well. And all I'm trying to do is help them get perspective on a golf shot." Well, I think many times, we beat up on ourselves. Many times we overreact in the wrong way because we've lost perspective. And many years ago, I had somebody give this to me. It's not mine. It's not original, but I've laminated it there, and it's kind of like it's mine now. And it was called "When It Looks Like I Have Failed." And here's what it says. It says, "Lord, are you trying to tell me something? For failure does not mean I'm a failure. Now, it does mean that I have not yet succeeded. Failure doesn't mean that I have accomplished nothing, but it does mean that I've learned something. Failure does not mean that I have been a fool. It does mean I've had enough faith to experiment. Failure does not mean I've been disgraced. It means I dared to try. Failure does not mean I don't have it. It does mean that I have to do something in a different way. Failure doesn't mean that I'm inferior. It does mean that I'm not perfect. Failure does not mean I've wasted my life. It does mean that I have an excuse to start over again. Failure does not mean that I should give up. It does mean that I should try harder. Failure doesn't mean that I'll never make it. It does mean I need more patience. And finally, failure doesn't mean that, Lord, you've abandoned me. It does mean that you must have a better idea. And I like that, because that's all about perspective. And Darren, I think that when I get too upset, it's probably the fact that I've lost my way as far as perspective is concerned, concerning my mistakes and my failures and what I need to learn from them and how I need to grow from them.
Make sure I've got this. I don't think I have this quote correct, so I want to have you say it again. Wrong action will not bury you, but your